Hello students, today we will continue with the class 8 chapter 6 history, colonialisms and the city, the story of an imperial capital. In previous class we had already discussed about the making of New Delhi and the planning of the new capital. And today we will move to the next topic of this chapter, what happened inside the old city. Old city means the Shah-Jahanabad that was built by the Shah Jahan. So in this city, Mughal gave the canal system, but soon the well system broken down. So look at this image. This is an image of a Baulis. So the system of a bells or Baulis also broken down inside the old city. And this was at a time when the population of the city was continuously growing. So people are facing water shortage problem because of poor drainage system. So at the end of the 19th centuries, a new system of open surface drains was introduced. So this system too was soon overburdened. And on the other hand, the Delhi municipal committees was unwilling to spend money on a good drainage system. But at the same time, though millions of rupees were being spent on drainage system in the New Delhi area. Decline of Havelis. Havelis means a traditional town house. The Mughal aristocrats during the time of 17th and 18th centuries used to live in Havelis. Aristocrats means the people of the highest social class who often have a special titles. So they were lived in the walled compounds with mansions. Mansions means a very large house called the Havelis. So a Haveli housed many families. On entering the Havelis, though a beautiful gateways and the inner courtyards with its pavilions and rooms were meant for the women of the household. That means inner rooms of these Havelis used by the women's and the outer rooms used by the men's. But during the time of the mid-19th centuries, many of the Mughal amirs were unable to maintain these large establishments under the conditions of British rules. So because of these reasons, Havelis began to subdivided and sold. Often, the street front of the Havelis became shops or warehouses, and some Havelis were taken over by the upcoming mercantile classes. That means they were used for the purpose of trade and commerce. After then, the colonial bungalows came into fashion. So the colonial bungalows was quite different from the Havelis. They were the single-story houses which had a verandas in its front. And the servants' quarters separates from the main house, and the house was run by the dozens of servants, and the women of the household often sat on the verandas and to supervise these servants. The municipalities begins to plan. So the census of 1931 show that the walled city area was horribly crowded with as many as 90 persons per acre, while a New Delhi had only about 3 persons per acre. So look at this image. This is an image of a street in a old Delhi that is too crowded area. So, however, the poor conditions in the walled city, however, did not stop it from expanding. So, in 1888, the Lahore Gate Improvement Scheme was planned by Robert Clark. Robert Clark brought the idea of a grid-based design for a new city, Clarkganj. So, the idea was to draw residents away from the old city to a new type of a market square around which shops would be built. Streets in this redevelopment strictly followed and the grid pattern and were of identical width, size and character. And land was divided into regular areas for the construction of neighborhoods. But the water supply and drainage in these new localities was very poor, so the idea failed due to lack of a proper water facilities. So the Clarkganj, as the development was called, remained incomplete and did not help to decongest the old city. So in 1936, the Delhi Improvement Trust was set up It built Daryaganj for wealthy Indians, and it had houses around the parks, had personal space for every family member. So now, different members of the same family had their own private spaces within the home. But Delhi did not remain the same. It changed during the partition of the country in 1947. So the partition of India in 1947 led to massive transfer of populations on both sides of the new border. So as a result, the populations of Delhi swelled and the kind of jobs people did change and the culture of the city became different. So during the time of partitions, thousands of people were killed and looted and their houses were burned, so many Muslims left for Pakistan. So nearly 5 lakh pupils were added to the Delhi's populations. So at the same time, Delhi became a city of refugees. They stayed in camps, schools, etc. and some got the opportunity to occupy residents that had been vacated and others were housed in refugees colonies. So new colonies such as Lajpat Nagar and Tilak Nagar came up at this time. The skills and occupations of the refugees were quite different from those of the peoples they replaced. Earlier, the Delhi residents were skilled labor, artisans, but the migrants who came were doctors, lawyers, etc. So partitions changed their lives and their occupations, and they had to take up new jobs as hawkers, carpenters, vendors, etc. Change in culture and taste. So after the partitions, the large migrations from Punjab changed the culture and taste of Delhi. So now new taste, food habits and cultures habits came into existence. Even the sensibility of dress and art also changed. So we can say a lot of things changed in Delhi. So now your chapter 6 history is to be completed in next class. We will be discussed about in next chapter. Thank you.